complete different administration making the rules.
Okay.
When he was in office, he gave opportunity zones, gave funding to HBCUs. He also implemented the First Step Act, which I feel like liberals really focus on, like, oh, our prison system has a majority of African Americans in there. So we gave them an opportunity to get out early, to start a new life. So I think if we're going to go back and look at some stuff in the 1970s, that's not really fair, because there's a lot of people on the Democrat side that have done worse things while in office. Joe Biden, who, when he was a senator, pushed to get African Americans incarcerated at a higher rate. Like, actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. And what Trump did in office helped the Black community at an exponential amount compared to all the other administrations on the Democratic Party.
Okay, so you're saying what he did in office helped African Americans more than other administrations.
Yeah.
You referenced historically Black universities.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how much funding he sent to HBCUs?
A decent amount. I can't give you the exact
So the
number.
exact amount was $250 million per year.
Okay.
Do you know how much Obama's administration and Biden's administration have sent?
I would like to hear.
Obama sent $1 billion a year, and Biden sent $4 billion a year. So not only did he decrease funding to historically Black universities, all right, but also you referenced the First Step Act there. How did Donald Trump influence the First Step Act to get passed?
Through Congress.
Well, how did he influence that bill through Congress?
Answer that question for me.
Because he didn't influence it. In fact, it was proposed to Congress under Obama's administration, and it was shot down. Then something else I did want to
But at the end of the day, as president, he has the ability to sign or send a bill back to Congress, and he signed it. If he was truly racist, he would not have signed it in the first place.
So in that discussion, as you saw from the intro, the person tried to imply that one of his prompt statements was Donald Trump is a racist, which to me, I was like, no, he's not. And the guy, he said all the facts. He focused on the nitty gritty, and then the Black guy, very simple. Like, you see this convoluted way the liberal went about trying to prove that Donald Trump's racist. Oh, look, Obama did this, Obama did that. He just passed things that was proposed. Oh, so he wasn't bipartisan and he was willing to take a bill that he thought was a good idea and pass it through with some adjustments? Oh, okay. But end of the day, he still signed a bill. He still tried to do something for Black people. Would a racist actually do that? And this is what I'm talking about. The liberal mind is like, yo, I'm trying to prescribe someone an intention. Oh, you're saying that because you're racist. Making an accusation, but then has no evidence to prove that motive. And that was the whole argument. The whole prompt was, is Donald Trump racist? You imply that, hey, this is Obama's policy. Oh, okay, so Trump passed Obama's policies. A non-white president's policies, and you still say he's racist. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. And this is a conversation I think we need to have, because a lot of these people, right, these liberals think they come to their own conclusions because of their own rationale thinking, and that goes against human nature. Humans are social creatures. And I believe many young people are socialized to be liberal because liberals have taken over the education system. And Patrick Bet-David put up an interesting screenshot of something, and I think he has an interesting idea. So I'm going to quote him right now. Liberal ideas have a monopoly on future leaders' minds. If this was to happen in business, antitrust laws would break them apart to prevent unjust monopolies. The primary purpose of universities went from debating ideas to indoctrinating political ideologies. No wonder kids are so confused today. Professors who are Democrats, therefore experts are Democrats too. Communications professors, 100% Democrat. Anthropology, religion, surprisingly, English, of course, sociology, duh, art, like, come on, music, theater, classics, geoscience, environmental, right? And I got something for environmental, because these people love to pretend that they just all in substance and evidence. And no, it's not. You got your own religion. It's called climate change. Climate change is not a threat, really, to the survival or human flourishing of other people, right? Climate change, in many facts, get in the way of human flourishing. And these are some of the ideas that I constantly challenge against. It's like, yo, young people are being brainwashed in political ideology. And I think this is why they can't have a fruitful debate, because they're so incensed to prove that their political ideology should be the philosophy of the society, that they don't want to concede any ground on actual factual things, such as, hey, don't you think climate change is an exaggerated problem? They think it's not. And then you give your evidence for why it is. For instance, I'll take a clip here to highlight something as an example of how the climate change approach is actually detrimental to human flourishing. Let's take a look.
What do people actually think they're achieving? Anybody can look at it's called the energy dashboard. You can get it up on your computer anytime and see on a normal day in this country where the power which is lighting your home and your place of work and everything else you see, where it's coming from. And on a day when the wind isn't blowing, it's largely coming from gas. Or it's coming from imported power, which quite often comes from the Netherlands, where they still burn coal. We don't burn coal anymore because we didn't just close down our coal-fired power stations, we blew them up. We were so certain we were right to do so. At the same time, China is, even as we speak, building the equivalent of two new coal-fired power stations a week. India has a vast expansion program of coal-fired power stations, even if George is right about his tremendous predictions of apocalypse. Even if he's right, the contribution which this country is making by what it's doing to these outcomes is not merely minimal, it's non-existent. Everything that we do is completely blotted out by what much larger countries are doing to maintain their own power. Now, if you want to live in a country with net zero, if you want to live in a country where nobody can afford to heat their house, where people have incredibly expensive and largely non-functioning heat pumps inflicted on them, if you want that kind of thing to happen to you, if you want lots of people to lose their jobs because there's no energy, if you want to be cold all the time, if you want the computers which make life possible in practically every form of life to shut down every so often, then carry on believing that the demand to go for net zero, to keep it in the ground, is intelligent and thoughtful.
Yeah, exactly. Human flourishing, right? Because end of the day, a lot of these people who are big climate change, environmentalist people, I look at them, I was like, yo, you can't go a week without internet. You can't go a week without power. You can't go a week without AC, depending on where you live, or heating, depending on where you live. And you want to push for, we got to make everything solar. We have to make everything wind. And then you don't see how a lot of these approaches that these people want, they have like pre-prescribed approaches to hitting their outcome. Oh, they're fine with using oil as long as it's to oil the windmill turbines, but you're still using oil though. People still have to provide you the oil. And it's this very superficial crap that they do. And this is why I don't have no respect for climate change people, advocates, and all this stuff. They want us to we got to stop producing coal. We got to stop producing carbon emissions. What is the rate of carbon emissions? Usually 0.0004%. Huh? That's it? That's how much carbon dioxide we're producing? That's all? Oh, this is exaggerated. Like you making it seem like we're blocking out the sun. And last time I checked, I thought carbon monoxides were good for the trees and for the environment. But for some reason, we've been brainwashed to think, or conditioned is the more accurate term, to think that this is a bad thing. That we shouldn't solely our hands. Like you just explained it. They're still building coal mines, and not coal mines. They're still building fossil fuel fracking technology infrastructure to use coal as their power base. India and China. And us, or the UK in this matter, decided, we want to be net zero. We could be net zero, but then we're still using net zero from someone else. Like we're still using gas from someone else. When the winds ain't blowing, when the sun's not out, which is going to drop power output, we're still reliant on oil, fossil fuels to power our society. Majority, 80% of the infrastructure is still powered by fossil fuels. Another good chunk is by nuclear energy, and it's like 5% solar and wind. Combined, solar and wind combined is only attributing to 5% of people's infrastructure. And how long y'all been pushing this? And you think it's a good idea? Solar and wind is not efficient. It's not cost efficient. It's not even energy efficient. The only thing that's competitive with fossil fuel from an energy efficient standpoint is nuclear energy. And green advocates hate nuclear energy. So make it make sense. And this is some of the narratives that I'm tired of hearing from the left. And it seems like that's all the left seems to have. They have nothing but narratives, no substance. In this another clip I got, see how this Axios journalist, so-called journalist, tries to um tell this guy from the NASA administration, hey, is it fine to be praising Elon Musk because he spread misinformation? Let's take a look.
Do you worry about Elon Musk and the misinformation that he spreads that detracts or distracts from NASA and its mission?
You know, the good news about that is that Elon has a president that he lets run the company, and her name is Gwen Shotwell. And she's done that. She was the 8th employee of SpaceX. And she's done a phenomenal job. And as we say in the South, the proof's in the pudding. Look at the crew to orbit, cargo to orbit. Now we'll see they, along with Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin, are going to be our 2 landers. We're going to get our astronauts to the moon in lunar orbit, and then they will transfer into first a SpaceX lander and then a Blue Origin lander.
Right, and I think it's not necessarily how SpaceX is run, as you're saying. I'm just talking about the distraction of the constant headlines about him, and if you all feel like that's a distraction.
Well, they distract you, but they don't distract NASA.
Oh my God, yo, this man was savage. He said it distracts you, it don't distract NASA. And this is the point I'm trying to highlight here, is that our education system is overwhelmingly ran by Democrat professors that teach a Democrat worldview that teaches political ideology to our impressionable young people, young students, and they filter this system onto us, expecting us to react the same way as they do. And to me, it's a very self-centered way of thinking. And this is one of my biggest problems with liberals, and why I say they're condescending, they're intolerant, is because pretty much what they want is just a validation of their worldview, right? When they talk to people, it's not necessarily they're looking for open-minded discussions. They have a particular range of where they can tolerate disagreement. And if you fall outside of that, usually if you're conservative, they don't want to associate with you. They want to label you something bad, like a racist, as you saw from the intro, or a purveyor of misinformation. They try to find ways to label you, to shun you, so then they can do this character assassination, which is their typical go-to line of attack I have noticed throughout my life. End of the day, look, the credibility speaks for itself. I come from the Black community. 90% of people in my community usually are either empathetic to the Democratic side or are Democrats. And I've seen this like constantly. I've seen it constantly. I'll make a point. They'll try to somehow tie it into a line for them to character assassinate because they expect me to back down. And I don't back down, and I always see they crumble. Because end of the day, their tactics only work if people perceive them to be credible. This is why they fight so hard to be in academia. This is why they fight so hard to be journalists. This is why they fight so hard to maintain their appearance of authority, because they know their characterization attacks doesn't work if they have no position of authority. But what happens when people stop respecting that position of authority? You're seeing as what's going on in the media. You're seeing what's going on in college. People are not taking it as, they don't perceive college as credibly as they used to. When you got the science institutions endorsing political candidates, it hurts the image of science. And what's science dominated by? I already showed you the chart. Overwhelmingly by Democrats. And these Democrats in these institutions are letting their bias corrupt their work. You saw an example with Google. Google's like, oh, this is nonpartisan. Gemini is going to be accurate. It's going to be a usable tool for all people. And they let a bunch of liberals develop it, and it ended up printing out Black George Washington, Black Nazis, Gemini, Google Gemini. But these people said, no, we were being professional. We were being objective when we created this thing. But somehow their political ideology bled into the AI bot, into the generative AI. What does that tell you? If that can happen in that, which we have a visible proof of it happening, how can therefore you not deny that it's not happening in education? How can you say it's not happening in our political discourse? How can you say it's not happening in journalism? Misinformation experts, they have the same bias. Many of them are Democrat. So how you know their bias is not bleeding into their work? How you know their bias is not letting them like be clueless of other evidence that proves the contrary opinion, that gives the contrary opinion credibility? How you know they're not actively or unconsciously ignoring those things or not seeing those things? They always talk about diversity, but they never really talk about diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives. They think that your skin color represents your culture when there's many people of the same skin color that comes from different cultures. That's how limited the diversity, even their words that you use, doesn't actually mean what they think it means. They only accept diversity as long as someone looks different but thinks the same way as a liberal. That is the reality of DEI. That's the reality of diversity. That is only coming from a liberal worldview to paint the liberal in a positive light. Because this is my argument. I believe many liberals want to see themselves as virtuous, moral, tolerant people. But that's only in appearance. In action, they're intolerant. They're immoral. Like they don't care about morality. They just use morality if it's a weapon they can use to slander the other side. And this is the kind of conclusions I'm coming about many liberals and their ideas, is that it's very superficial. You want to superficially appear tolerant, but when it's called to question, hey, time for you to be tolerant of this, your friend coming out as a Trump supporter to you, you block them. You slandered them. You knew them from years, but all of a sudden you find out they're a Trump supporter, now they're racist. Democrats for you. Oh, Republicans and conservatives, they live in a bubble. You don't live in a bubble? You go to college where your professors are overwhelmingly Democrats. The experts you reference are overwhelmingly Democrat. The journalists you take your news from is overwhelmingly Democrat. And you're not living in a bubble, liberal? Pot calling the kettle black. This is why I call it I call it the liberal projection fallacy. Whatever liberals are guilty of, they project onto their opposition, and they pretend or they don't notice that they're just as guilty. Oh, political violent rhetoric is coming from the right. Right. Two assassination attempts on Donald Trump. Usually if someone's spewing political violence, it's not against themselves. I didn't know Donald Trump was suicidal, but this is the left's narrative here. When you ask for validation, when you ask for proof, these people's narratives just crumble like cookies. Crumble. But they still expect credibility. They still expect you to take them seriously. When this is all, in the end of the day, it seemed like a tribal political game to many people on the left, right? And they'll say anything, essentially do anything to get their outcome. And this is why I want American voters to understand, especially those who are in the middle, especially those who are independent, is that the liberal Democrat is the most ideological out of the two. Yes, in times prior, you could make the argument conservatives were more ideological than liberals. But like I stated before, in 2024, we're in the middle of a political realignment right now, where what conservatives are trying to conserve right now is the American nation, how it was in prior years past, right? It's based on almost on a national patriotism perspective, not on a religious perspective. And I think this is why Donald Trump appeals to so many people. Why Donald Trump got former Democrats aligning with him, willing to be opened up to libertarians being in his administration, because Donald Trump's movement is not based on purely political ideology. It's based on a core function, a source of truth, which is, I want this country to be better for Americans, and I'm only going to focus on outcomes and results. And you can only get that from a business-minded person. That's one thing I realized with Donald Trump. I'm like, why do I vote for Donald Trump? Why do people seem, no matter their political affiliation, gravitate to Donald Trump? Because he's about results, like any businessman is. Because if you don't have results, you don't make money. And for too long, we let this government run on intentions and not on results. We judge government officials on their intentions, what they're going to do in office, how they look, Do they look presidential? Do they look like somebody I could aspire to be? Like, politicians essentially became actors. How well does this politician act like they're a good, moral, upstanding person? As American voters, we've been voting on fakeness. And there's no one faker than a Democrat, no one faker than a liberal. I know I made it political at the end, but prove me wrong. Like, just look at how a liberal talk. Everything is about making the other side look like the worst thing since sliced bread. Now, you can argue maybe I'm doing the same thing, but I'm highlighting things that liberals tend to do, right? So even when I'm generalizing, it's not really generalizing. I'm just saying what I'm saying is generally true of liberals. But you can disagree with me. I'm open to disagreement because unlike a liberal, I'm not going to block you. I'm not going to disparage you. I'm not going to call you a racist because you disagree with me. I'm going to just contend with the argument you just laid out. But I digress. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate you guys watching the end of the video. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.